Dirtle Magic! Hello and welcome back. You can follow our post on Twitter and Facebook at DirtleMTG to stay up to date on our latest videos and other posts, and you can join a more robust discussion about Casual Commander at our blog, thedicebag.blog. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this content to help the channel and the blog grow. Another way you can support the channel, though, is through our affiliate links in the description below. If you're looking for single sealed product or gaming accessories to protect all of that glory, please consider clicking the links in the description. Now, grab some spells, it's time to dirtle. Being at the top can be lonely, but you do get to keep an eye on things. Better yet, if you're a seer like Raffine. What is to come cannot always be determined though. Raiyuu, Thassa, and Sisay might just be able to change the outcome in their favor. Fated to win the die roll, Raiyuu drops an Arid Mesa. They crack it for a Sacred Foundry, which comes into play tapped. Thassa drops a Snow Island and casts Ponder. Sisay's turn has a Witherbloom Campus into play. I drop Egangel Castle and cast Esper Sentinel. Back to Raiyuu, and they drop a Cavern of Souls, picking Samurai as the creature type. Thassa drops another Snow Island, and Ivory Tower hits the stack. The Sentinel triggers, but they pay for the tax. Sisay plays a Terramorphic Expanse, cracking it and grabbing an island into play tapped. I draw an island myself and play it to the table. I move to combat and swing the Sentinel into the Sisay player. They take one, and I pass. Command Tower hits the field for Raiyuu. They cast Herald's Horn, and I get to draw a Rogue's Passage. Thassa's turn has the first trigger of the Ivory Tower, and they gain 2 life. Another island comes into play, and they cast a Snapcaster Mage. Once in play, they use it to recast Ponder from the graveyard, and I get to draw Propaganda. The turn moves to Sisay, and they play a Plains. They cast Mana Geode, and I get to draw Frost Titan. When the Geode comes into play, the player scries 1. My turn proper, and Adakar Waste comes to my hand. I drop a Swamp, and cast Nimble Larcenist. Once in play, I take a glance at Thassa's hand, deciding to exile the Extraplanar Lens. I go to attacks, and the Sentinel runs over to Raiyuu, dealing 1 damage. I discard a Plains, and pass. To Raiyuu, and the Herald's Horn triggers. They reveal no new cards, and a mountain comes down. Their commander, the Storm's Edge, comes down, and they pass. Back to Thassa, and they gain 1 life from the tower. An island into play, and Thassa comes up from the deep. Sisay's turn sees a Selesnya Guildgate into play. Their commander hits the field, and they pass afterward. I draw Unburial Rites, and drop the Wastes. I cast Raffine from my command zone, and move to combat. I swing the Larcenist into the Raiyuu player, and Raffine triggers, allowing it to connive. I draw an Inspiring Overseer, and discard the Unburial Rites. The Larcenist gains a 1/1 counter, and it deals 3 damage to the Raiyuu player. Raiyuu's turn has their Horn grab them a card, and they cast Aki Ronin during the first main phase. They also cast Turian Mauler, who counts as a warrior and a samurai, and they move to combat. Raiyuu swings, and the Aki and the Storm Edge both trigger, letting them rummage and gaining another attack phase. Raiyuu untaps, and is running into Sisay. They take 3, and it moves to the next combat. They swing with Raiyuu again, and gain more triggers. This time, their commander is going at Thassa. They also take the damage, and it moves to the second main. A Cathedral of War hits the field, and the turn rolls over. Back to Thassa, and they gain 1 life. Gilded Lotus hits the stack after an island is dropped, and the Mauler gets bigger while I draw Can't Stay Away. They use the mana from their new Lotus to cast a Walking Atlas, and pass. Sisay's turn has a Zet Guildgate in play during the second main. Thassa, Orzhov's Scion hits the field, followed by General's Enforcer. Their legendary human creatures are now indestructible. I draw a Path to Exile on my turn, and drop the Rogue's Passage. I cast Propaganda to try to stave off any attacks, and it triggers the Mauler. I move to combat, and swing Raffine into the Sisay player. I connive, drawing a Tomebound Lich, and discard Can't Stay Away. Raffine gains a counter, and deals 2 damage to my opponent. Raiyuu's turn has no extra card from the Horn this time. They move straight to attacks, and swing with their commander at the Thassa player. They gain their triggers, now including the Cathedral of War for its Exalted, rummage, and get to attack again. The Thassa player blocks with their Walking Atlas, which dies in combat. To the next combat, and Raiyuu is sent into me with a payment for Propaganda. They gain more triggers, and I respond with Path to Exile on their commander. They grab a land while the Mauler continues to grow. In the second main, Open the Armory is cast, Unfortunately though, I don't get to draw off the Sentinel. They tutor up a Shadow Spear and pass. Back to Thassa, who gains no life this turn from their tower. Strip Mine comes down for them, and they cast a Clock of Omens. Mauler grows, but I gain no cards. Clock of Omens is used to untap the Gilded Lotus, and the renewed mana is used to cast Unwinding Clock. 2 Sisay, and they play a forest. They cast a Beacon of Unrest targeting Fumiko the Lowblood in the Raiyuu player's graveyard. Once in play, Fumiko forces all creatures opponents control to attack. They pass. I draw Plains for the turn and drop it to the field. I head straight to combat and swing Raffine and the Larcenist at the Sisay player and send the Sentinel at Thassa. I have the Sentinel connive and draw 3 cards, discarding an Island, Bajuka Bog, and Inspiring Overseer. However, I neglect to make the Sentinel big enough to survive the assault, and the Snapcaster Mage trades with it in combat while the Sisay player takes 5, 2 of it being Commander. In the second main phase, I cast Frost Titan and use its ETB to keep the Mauler tapped down for a turn cycle. Raiyuu's turn has the Horn revealing a Peerless Samurai. Rogue's Passage hits the field, and they cast the Samurai. Shadow Spear then hits the stack, and once in play, gets equipped to the Aki Ronin. When combat begins, the Thassa player uses the Commander to tap down the Aki, and the Raiyuu player passes. To Thassa's turn, and it begins and ends with the casting of Mystic Remora. Sisay's turn has an Evolving Wilds into play. Sisay is activated, and the player tutors up an Onsera's Wings, which enchants the General's Enforcer. They go to combat and swing the enchanted Enforcer at me, and I take 3. In the second main, the Wilds is cracked to grab a Swamp. An Orzhov Signet finds its way to my hand, and I cast it. Thassa draws a card from the Remora, and the Mauler continues its Jelly evolution. I move to combat and swing the Titan at the Thassa player, and the Flyers at Sisay. I keep the Mauler tapped with the Titan trigger, and connive with Raffine. I draw Army of the Damned, Divine Reckoning, and Herald of the Host. I discard the Angel of Runes along with the 2 flashback cards. The Enforcer from Sisay intercepts Raffine because I forgot it has flying. Otherwise, the damage from the other creatures is good, with Thassa going down to 39 and Sisay to 32. In the second main, I attempt a flashback on Burial Rites targeting the Angel of Runes, but it gets mana tithed by Raiyuu. They also activate their Shadow Sphere to take away Hexproof and Indestructible from opponent's creatures. This causes the Enforcer to die, and Tay said to trigger to make a 1/1 Spirit token for the Sisay player. The stack resolves, and the counter is successful as I berate myself for not using the Signet on my field earlier. I pass completely defenseless. Back to the Samurai player, and the Horn grants a Ronin Cliff Rider. The Cliff Rider sees its way to the battlefield, and they move to attacks. Thassa responds by tapping down the Aki again with their commander, along with the Peerless Samurai. Raiyuu passes. Thassa's turn has the first upkeep trigger for the Mystic Remora, and they pay to keep it around. The tower gains them no life, and they move to the first main phase to cast Trophy Mage. Once in play, they tutor up a Sculpting Steel. Clock of Omens is used to untap the Gilded Lotus, and the mana is used to cast Fabricate. They tutor up another artifact, this time Solemn Simulacrum. They cast the Sad Robot, and they grab an island when it comes into play. The clock is activated again, targeting the Lotus, and the mana is used to cast Sculpting Steel. It comes into play as another Sad Robot, and they grab another island. They then move to their end of turn, and blink the original Sad Robot and grab yet another land. The turn moves to Sisay, and an island drops to the field. Audric, Lunarch Marshal is cast, and once in play, Sisay is activated. They tutor up Adeline, Resplendent Cathar, and things get slightly more dangerous. They move to combat, and Audric triggers, giving all of their creatures flying, vigilance, and indestructible. They swing Sisay at the Raiyuu player, and that player responds with Teferi's Protection. They fade out of existence, and Adeline's triggers resolve to send a token at each opponent. However, these tokens are sacrificed to use Tessa's ability to exile a creature before they can connect, and they target Raffine. Luckily, Ward 1 is enough, and the ability is countered. Sisay passes the turn. I draw Lear, Disciple of the Drowned on my turn. I move to attacks, and swing Raffine and the Larcenist into the Thassa player, and the Titan into the Sisay player. I tap down Sisay with the trigger from the Titan, and connive with Raffine. I draw Metropolis Angel, Resculpt, and Bone Miser. I discard Resculpt, the Angel, and Rankle. Damage is good everywhere, and Thassa drops to 24, and Sisay to 26. In the second main, I cast Divine Reckoning with Flashback, trying to get rid of Adeline. I had hoped to save it for the Raiyuu player when they phased back in, but, Adeline can get out of hand. Thassa is activated to exile a creature, but I don't see what it targets and nothing seems to happen. Once that resolves, I choose to keep Raffine. Thassa keeps their Trophy Mage, and Sisay quits the game. The board is mostly wiped, and the Thassa player gets to draw 2 cards. The Horn gives up nothing on Raiyuu's turn. They drop a Pathway of Ancestry, and declare they aren't going to swing at the Thassa player, so they don't have to tap down their attackers, or supposed attackers. They equip the Shadow Spear to the Mauler, and go to combat. However, before they can attack, the Mauler is tapped down by the Thassa player, who I will point out never actually agreed to not tap the creature. The clock is activated to untap the Lilith, and the Thassa player activates the commander again to tap down the Peerless Samurai. To the attack step, and the Cliff Rider swings into the Thassa player, gaining triggers from the Cathedral and various samurai. The Thassa player takes 3 damage. In the second main, the Raiyuu player casts a Cleansing Nova, exiling all artifacts and enchantments. The turn moves to Thassa, and Mana Crypt hits the field. It's followed by Gauntlet of Power, and they choose blue. Seagate Oracle comes down, and then Cloud of Fairies enters, untapping 2 lands. Venser, Shaper Savant, then comes down, and bounces the Mauler away. They go to their end step, and the Oracle gets blinked for some extra card selection. My turn gives me an Isolated Chapel. I drop it, and then cast Leer. I use their ability to cast Path from my graveyard, and exile Thassa. In response, Raffine is tapped by the Thassa player, paying for the ward cost. They grab an island, and I cast Conqueror's Flail, not having blue mana for Resculpt, and pass. Back to Raiyuu, and a Scavenger Grounds hits the field. Arcane Signet is cast, and an Angelic Exaltation follows it down. They go to combat and swing the Cliff Rider at me, gaining a new trigger in the Exaltation. I don't block, and take 6, dropping to 28. The turn moves to Thassa, and the Crypt triggers. They win the flip, and take no damage. An Island enters play, and they tap all of their mana. Flood of Tears is then cast, and the board is bounced away, with Aetherflux Reservoir coming down because of the ability of Flood of Tears. Mana Crypt hits the stack, and Aetherflux triggers. Spellbook follows it, along with the Trophy Mage, Seagate Oracle, Consecrated Sphinx, Cloud of Fairies, Gauntlet of Power, and Crystal Shard. With a total of 9 Flux triggers and a life total of 65, the Thassa player activates their artifact and blasts me out of the game. Venser then comes down, and they bounce the Path of Ancestry back to Raiyuu's hand. To Raiyuu's turn, and they draw while the Sphinx triggers for the first time, drawing the Thassa player 2 cards. Path of Ancestry comes back to play, and Arcane Signet is recast. They recast Peerless Samurai and the Mauler. Back to Thassa, and the Crypt triggers again. They lose the flip this time and take 3 damage. Thassa is recast, and the Flux and Mauler trigger. They go to attacks, and swing the Sphinx into the opponent, and they take 5. At the end of turn, they blink the Oracle for more card selection. Raiyuu's turn has the Sphinx trigger again. They drop Shinka, the Blood-Soaked Keep, and cast Samurai of the Pale Curtain, scrying 1 with the mana from the Path of Ancestry. Going to attacks, they attack with the Mauler, triggering the Cathedral and the Peerless Samurai. They then activate Rogue's Passage to make the Mauler unblockable. Thassa responds with Crystal Shard to bounce Venser back to their hand. They then recast Venser, and once in play, they use the trigger to bounce away the Cavern of Souls. The Thassa player ends up taking 5, dropping to 19. In the second main, Aki Ronin is recast, and the Raiyuu player passes. Back to Thassa, and the Crypt has them take 3 on the loss of the flip. They cast a Vidalcan, the word I can't say ever, and the Raiyuu player surrenders. Good game to my opponents. When building this deck, I forgot to check to see if there are any good Madness cards. Oh well. The ability to boost your creature's effective size and give yourself card selection to sculpt a hand for the situation on board is a pretty powerful ability. Ward 1 helping to protect Raffine is also a nice bonus, and it saved my Raffine from being exiled by Sisay's Thassa. The commander itself is fairly flexible too, and allows for a number of different strategies including 1/1 counters, Tron, control builds, or maybe just a hybrid of all 3. It really doesn't matter. Thank you for tuning in for another casual commander game here on Dirtle Magic. Until next time, stay safe out there.